Strategic Overseer Vectera's electromagnetic tendrils danced across the crystalline control surfaces of her observation chamber, each movement precise and calculated. The holographic displays surrounding her pulsed with data streams chronicling 3 cycles of Earth's military history. Her silver eyes reflected the soft blue glow of combat footage from humanity's most significant conflicts, each frame analyzed down to the smallest detail. "Fascinating creatures," she murmured, her translator converting her harmonic speech into standard hegemony frequencies. So predictable in their unpredictability. The chamber's walls shifted from transparent to reflective as she initiated her final analysis. Earth's wars played out in perfect chronological order. World War II's massive naval engagements, Vietnam's guerrilla tactics, Desert Storm's precision strikes, and the modern drone warfare that humans seem so proud of developing. Each conflict added another variable to her equations, another predictable pattern in humanity's martial evolution. Dr. Amanda Miller's latest publication floated in the center of the chamber, its contents dissected and categorized by Vectera's analytical systems. The human military historian had unknowingly provided the final piece of Vectera's invasion puzzle, a comprehensive analysis of how human combat doctrine had evolved over the centuries. Computer, overlay Miller's strategic analysis with the Berkman-Hausdorff combat response matrices, Vectera commanded. The holographic displays shimmered, combining the 2 data sets into a complex 3-dimensional model of human military behavior. Patterns emerged, clear as stellar formations to her trained eye. Vectera allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 3 cycles of observation had led to this moment, and her findings were irrefutable. Humans, for all their supposed adaptability, followed clear mathematical patterns in their responses to threats. Their creativity, their much-vaunted ingenuity, all of it could be reduced to predictable variables in her equations. The Hegemony Council chamber materialized around her as she initiated the emergency session. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy focused their attention on her presentation, their various sensory organs all trained on the data streams she projected. "Honorable Council," Vectera began, her voice modulated to convey both respect and absolute certainty. "I present my completed analysis of Species 7742, designation, Humanity. My findings indicate an unprecedented opportunity for efficient conquest." The Council's senior observer leaned forward, his crystalline form refracting the light. "Your record speaks for itself, Strategic Overseer. 274 planetary acquisitions, 0 failures. Yet you claim this species requires special attention." Indeed, Vectera's tendrils manipulated the display, showing Earth's defensive capabilities. Humans believe themselves to be unpredictable, adaptive. This perceived strength is actually their greatest weakness. By analyzing their military history, I have identified every possible response they might mount to our invasion. Their patterns are clear, their strategies mathematically predictable. She projected her invasion plan, a masterwork of strategic calculation, a precision strike force, no more than 3 battle groups. My models show a 99.97% chance of success, with minimal casualties on either side. Humanity's military responses will follow these exact patterns. The display highlighted key strategic points around the globe. Their resistance will crumble within 2 standard cycles. The Council members communicated among themselves in a burst of electromagnetic pulses. Vectera waited patiently, knowing her methodology was flawless. She had spent 3 cycles studying every aspect of human warfare, from their crude beginnings with gunpowder to their latest autonomous weapon systems. Every variable had been accounted for, every possible response calculated. "Your confidence is noted, Strategic Overseer," the senior observer finally responded. "But these humans, their information networks contain countless scenarios of alien invasion. They have prepared for this possibility, even if only in theory." Vectera's tendrils rippled with barely contained amusement. "Those very scenarios prove my point, Honorable One. Their imagination traps them within predictable response patterns. Every invasion they have envisioned follows logical progressions that we can anticipate and counter. The council chambers fell silent as her final calculations appeared, a beautiful tapestry of mathematical certainty. Every human response, every potential strategy, every possible variable had been accounted for. Vectera's invasion plan was perfect, a masterpiece of strategic planning that would cement her place in hegemony history. Very well, the senior observer declared. You have command of the invasion force. Proceed according to your calculations. As the council chamber faded away, Vectera returned her attention to the Earth observations. Soon, she would prove once and for all that even the most chaotic species could be reduced to mathematical constants. Humanity's time had come, and they wouldn't even see it coming. She had calculated everything, or so she thought. At precisely 300 GMT, Vectera's invasion force descended from high orbit. Her calculations had predicted a 16-minute window of optimal confusion in Earth's defense networks, a perfect moment when satellite coverage would be at its weakest and human response times at their longest. First wave proceeding exactly as calculated, she announced to her command staff, her tendrils rippling with satisfaction as the holographic displays showed her ships sliding through Earth's defensive grid. Targeting solutions matched predictions to within 0.3%. The initial strikes were surgical in their precision. Military bases across the globe erupted in silent flashes as plasma beams lanced down from orbit, each target selected to maximize strategic impact while minimizing civilian casualties. Vectera had calculated that humans would appreciate this restraint, making their eventual surrender more palatable. Then came the first anomaly. Strategic Overseer, her sensor officer called out, harmonic frequencies betraying confusion. We're detecting an unexpected vessel movement in the Gulf of Mexico. Vectera's tendrils waved dismissively, civilian craft attempting to flee the engagement zone. Predicted response pattern Delta 7. No, Overseer. It's approaching our third battle group's primary sensor array. At ramming speed. The Miss Daisy, a weathered fishing boat out of Tampa Bay, slammed into the Hegemony cruiser's sensitively calibrated sensor dome. Captain Jack Thompson, whose fishing spot of 20 years had been ruined by the alien ship's arrival, had decided to express his disapproval in the most direct way possible. The resulting blind spot in the Hegemony's detection grid allowed 3 squadrons of F-35s to slip through supposedly impenetrable defenses. Vectera's perfect formation began to unravel. Minor deviation, she assured her increasingly nervous staff. Adjust formation pattern to compensate for the statistical outlier. But the anomalies kept coming. In Nebraska, Colonel Rebecca Hayes stared at her laptop screen in her farmhouse kitchen, coordinating with other veterans through a hastily established Discord server. They're expecting us to follow standard military protocols, she explained to her impromptu militia, made up of farmers, mechanics, and local hunting enthusiasts. So we won't. Within hours, combine harvesters retrofitted with salvaged alien technology were wreaking havoc on Hegemony ground forces. The alien metals, it turned out, were surprisingly compatible with John Deere hydraulic systems. Vectera's tendrils twisted in agitation as reports flooded in. Her surveillance systems caught fragments of human communication that defied all tactical logic. Teenagers were using TikTok dances to coordinate resistance movements, each seemingly random gesture conveying battlefield intelligence. Twitter threads about celebrity gossip contained coded instructions for improvised weapons manufacturing. Impossible, she muttered, watching as her carefully calculated invasion timetable collapsed. The response patterns aren't matching any of the predicted scenarios. In her command center, Vectera frantically adjusted her models. The humans were using civilian infrastructure in ways that violated basic military doctrine. Shopping malls became fortresses. Delivery drivers formed intelligence networks. A group of paintball enthusiasts successfully ambushed a Hegemony patrol using tactics from their last weekend tournament. Strategic Overseer, her second-in-command, ventured carefully. Perhaps we should reassess our basic assumptions about human military behavior. Nonsense. Vectera snapped, her tendrils whipping through the holographic displays as she input new variables. These are merely statistical anomalies. The underlying patterns remain valid. Humans are logical creatures responding to threat stimuli. Their behaviors can be predicted. A notification flashed across her screen. Another impossible development. Somewhere in Michigan, humans had already begun reverse engineering hegemony technology. Amateur radio operators were figuring out how to jam alien communications using modified microwave ovens. Adjust invasion pattern epsilon, she commanded, her voice carrying less certainty than before. Accelerate the deployment schedule. Once we establish our primary control zones, these random elements will fall into predictable patterns. But as she watched her perfect equations collapse into chaos, a treacherous thought crept into Vectera's mind. What if she had made a fundamental error? What if human unpredictability couldn't be reduced to mathematical constants? No, she said firmly, pushing the doubt away. The math is perfect. The patterns are there. Humans simply need to be shown the futility of resistance. Then they will behave according to predictions. Above her command center, a civilian weather satellite, reprogrammed by a 16-year-old hacker named Kevin, began tracking hegemony ship movements. The invasion's second hour was about to become even more interesting than the first. Vectera's command center hummed with nervous energy as she initiated Phase 3 of the invasion. Her psychological warfare division had spent decades perfecting their techniques across hundreds of conquered worlds. The calculations were clear. Expose any sentient species to precisely calibrated fears, and their social cohesion would crumble. Begin the terror protocols, she ordered, her tendrils moving with less confidence than before. Project the nightmare entities over their major population centers. Massive holographic horrors materialized above Earth's cities, drawn from humanity's deepest prehistoric fears. Chitinous monsters larger than skyscrapers, writhing tentacles that blotted out the sun, faces that triggered instinctive revulsion in the human brain. Vectera waited for the inevitable panic. Instead, her sensors detected laughter. Strategic Overseer, her psychological warfare chief, reported, the humans are taking pictures with the projections. They're using something called Instagram filters to add accessories to our horror constructs. Vectera's tendrils coiled in disbelief as she watched a teenager in Tokyo pose for a selfie with a planet-destroying monster, adding cartoon cat ears to the image. In Times Square, street vendors were already selling "I Survived the Alien Invasion" 2025 t-shirts, complete with surprisingly accurate renderings of hegemony vessels. Impossible, she hissed. The fear response indices should be off the charts. Their civilization should be paralyzed with terror. Lieutenant Michael O'Brien crouched behind a destroyed hegemony walker in downtown Seattle, coordinating with his resistance cell through a gaming headset. They're using standard video game boss patterns, he explained to his team. A mix of military veterans and competitive gamers. Watch their weapon systems rotate clockwise, just like in Stellar Conquest IV. The aliens never saw the attack coming. O'Brien's team used speedrunning strategies from their favorite games to exploit gaps in the hegemony's patrol patterns, treating the actual alien invasion like just another raid boss to be defeated. Vectera's psychological models collapsed further as humans responded to existential threats with what her analysts could only classify as weaponized irreverence. When the hegemony deployed sonic weapons designed to induce terror, humans organized impromptu dance parties. Resistance fighters nicknamed captured alien vehicles after cartoon characters, leading to the surreal sight of military commanders discussing the tactical positioning of SpongeBob and Patrick. Strategic Overseer, her cultural analysis officer, interrupted. We've detected another anomaly in their communication patterns. Humans are using something called memes to coordinate resistance efforts. Vectera's displays filled with images that defied military logic. Pictures of cats with misspelled captions somehow conveyed complex battle plans. A video of someone failing at cooking pasta secretly contained encrypted instructions for disabling hegemony shield generators. Their psychological responses don't match any known patterns, her chief analyst admitted. They're turning our terror weapons into entertainment. Some humans are actually rating our horror constructs on a scale of 1 to 10 for creativity and spooky aesthetic. In Chicago, a group of art students had turned a downed hegemony ship into an interactive installation piece. Street artists in Rio were incorporating the invasion's imagery into elaborate murals. A comedian's stand-up routine about the proper etiquette for surrendering to alien overlords had gone viral. "Adjust the fear harmonics," Vectera commanded, her voice carrying an edge of desperation. "Increase the psychological pressure. They must have a breaking point." The hegemony deployed their most advanced terror technologies, carefully calibrated to shatter human morale. Humanity responded by turning the invasion into a global meme, complete with branded merchandise and trending hashtags. Strategic Overseer, her second-in-command, ventured cautiously. "Perhaps we should consider that our psychological warfare models are fundamentally flawed when it comes to this species." Vectera's tendrils lashed out, scattering holographic displays. "The models are perfect. Humans simply need to be shown the true meaning of fear. Deploy the nightmare engines to their population centers. Let's see them make jokes about that." But as she issued the command, her sensors detected a new transmission going viral across human networks. Someone had remixed the sound of hegemony warfare engines into a catchy dance track, and flash mobs were breaking out in the middle of active combat zones. In her private quarters later, Vectera stared at her probability matrices, watching as they struggled to account for a species that responded to apocalyptic terror with humor and creativity. For the first time in her career, she felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. Vectera's private interrogation chamber was designed to induce maximum psychological discomfort in any known species. The walls shifted between transparent and opaque at random intervals, creating a sense of spatial uncertainty. The temperature fluctuated in patterns specifically calculated to disrupt cognitive function. None of this seemed to bother Major Kate Harrison, who sat calmly in the center of the room, sipping coffee from a stolen hegemony container she had somehow modified into a makeshift mug. "Interesting design," Harrison commented, examining the chamber's crystalline architecture. "Reminds me of my daughter's kaleidoscope." Vectera's tendrils twisted in frustration. The human had been captured leading a raid that should have been impossible. A small team of resistance fighters had penetrated 3 layers of hegemony defenses using tactics that appeared completely random to surveillance systems. "Your attack pattern defied all strategic logic," Vectera stated, her translator struggling to convey her mixture of curiosity and annoyance. "Our analyses show 17 points where your team should have been detected and eliminated." Harrison took another sip of coffee. "You know what my 6-year-old told me last week? She said the monster under her bed can't catch her if she jumps from her doorway to her mattress. Got me thinking about your sensor grid's blind spots." Vectera's tendrils froze mid-motion. "You based a military operation on a child's game." "Kids are amazing strategic thinkers," Harrison replied with a shrug. "They haven't learned what's supposed to be impossible yet. Your sensors look for logical approach patterns. Emma taught me that sometimes the best path is the one that makes no sense at all." The strategic overseer began pacing, her perfect posture showing the first signs of agitation. "But your species has developed clear military doctrines. We studied your entire tactical history. The patterns are exactly what you expected to find." Harrison interrupted, setting down her improvised coffee mug. "Here's the thing about humans. The moment we establish a pattern, someone comes along and breaks it just to see what happens. You calculated every logical response, but humans specialize in illogical solutions." Vectera's analytical displays filled with data as she pulled up the raid footage. "Your team used maintenance tunnels that were clearly marked as hazardous. You transmitted communications through frequencies we use for waste management systems. You played hide and seek," Harrison said simply. Emma's favorite version. She calls it hiding where the seeker thinks is too silly to look. Your forces were expecting a tactical infiltration. Nobody expected us to walk right through your front door, disguised as your own maintenance drones. The concept threatened to shatter Vectera's fundamental understanding of military strategy. But the risk calculations. Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy, Harrison continued, standing up to stretch. You know what else Emma taught me? When she plays chess against her computer, she makes random moves for the first 5 turns. Says it confuses the AI because it keeps trying to figure out her plan when there isn't one. Vectera's tendrils curled inward, a gesture of deep distress. Your species cannot survive on chaos alone. There must be underlying patterns. The pattern is that there is no pattern, Harrison replied, walking to one of the shifting walls. Humans are at their most dangerous when you back us into a corner because that's when we stop playing by anyone's rules, including our own. The Major paused, running her hand along the crystalline surface. You know what the real problem with your calculations is. You assume humans would choose the best solution out of all available options. But sometimes we look at all the sensible choices and think, nah, let's try something completely ridiculous instead. And the crazy thing is, it often works. Vectera watched in growing horror as Harrison pressed a specific sequence of points on the wall, the same pattern her daughter used to turn off her nightlight. The chamber's security systems, programmed to detect and counter every known hacking method, had no defense against the logic of a child's bedtime routine. Thanks for the coffee chat, Harrison said as a section of the wall dissolved. Oh, and Vectera, Emma wanted me to tell you that your scary holograms need more sparkles. As alarms blared and security forces scrambled, Vectera stared at her probability matrices, watching them try to calculate the mathematical likelihood of being outsmarted by a 6-year-old's games. For the first time in her career, she began to wonder if some variables simply couldn't be quantified. Vectera's command center had become a monument to mathematical failure. Holographic displays flickered with an endless stream of statistical anomalies as humans continued to defy every prediction her models generated. Her once pristine strategic calculations now resembled abstract art, filled with impossible variables and outcomes that shouldn't exist. Strategic Overseer, her sensor chief reported, mandibles clicking nervously. We've detected unusual movement in the Seattle sector. The humans are launching projectiles at our ships. Conventional missiles. Vectera asked, her tendrils already moving to calculate intercept trajectories. No, Overseer. They appear to be using medieval siege weapons. James Wilson, former barista and now resistance fighter, had made a crucial discovery while trying to sneak his morning coffee past hegemony sensors. The aliens' advanced shields, calibrated to detect high-velocity threats, completely ignored objects moving below a certain speed. His solution? Repurposed construction equipment transformed into modern-day trebuchets. Their shields can't track slow objects. Wilson shouted to his team as they loaded another salvaged piece of alien technology into their makeshift catapult. Just like playing Angry Birds, but with real physics. Vectera watched in disbelief as her supposedly impenetrable defensive screens were breached by projectiles, moving at speeds her systems considered too slow to be threatening. Her engineers had never considered the possibility of an advanced species choosing to use such primitive technology. Meanwhile, in a high school physics classroom turned resistance headquarters, Thomas Anderson was giving his most important lesson yet. Pay attention, class, he announced to a room full of fighters, his whiteboard covered in calculations. The aliens' gravity manipulation technology operates on a principle similar to electromagnetic resonance, and what happens when we introduce a counterfrequency. One of his former students raised her hand. The same thing that happened when Joey brought his metal lunchbox into the microwave lab. Exactly. Anderson beamed. Now, who wants to help me turn some kitchen appliances into anti-gravity disruptors? Vectera's tendrils coiled in distress as reports flooded in. Human civilians were adapting faster than her military forces could respond. A group of skateboarders in Los Angeles had figured out how to use their board's momentum to slip through hegemony energy barriers. Grandmother Martha Stevens in Kansas had discovered that her old copper wind chimes could scramble alien communication frequencies. Our casualty predictions were off by several orders of magnitude. Her statistical officer reported, voice trembling, "The humans are turning everything into a weapon." Everything. The Hegemony Council's holographic avatars materialized in her command center, their crystalline forms radiating disapproval. "Explain yourself, Strategic Overseer," the senior observer demanded. "Your perfect record lies in ruins. How could your calculations have been so wrong?" Vectera's tendrils moved frantically through her displays, searching for answers. The humans, they're not following any known patterns of technological advancement. They're going backwards, sideways, combining primitive methods with advanced concepts in ways that defy strategic logic. A notification flashed across her screen. Another impossible development. A group of high school students had rewired their calculators to detect hegemony stealth fields. A cooking club in Montreal had discovered that certain spice combinations could short-circuit alien sensor arrays. Their innovation rate exceeds all known parameters, Vectera admitted, her confidence crumbling like her invasion plans. They're not advancing along predicted technological lines. They're simply trying everything, all at once, without regard for conventional progression. The council members exchanged concerned electromagnetic pulses, and their success rate. 17%, Vectera responded, her tendrils drooping. But they're attempting so many different approaches simultaneously that even this low success rate is overwhelming our adaptive capabilities. They're not learning from their failures the way they should. They're celebrating them, sharing them, using them to spawn even more impossible ideas. As if to punctuate her point, alarms blared throughout the command center. Somewhere in Detroit, auto mechanics had figured out how to convert old muscle cars into gravity-defying assault vehicles. The resulting high-speed chase had turned into what humans were calling the most awesome street race in history. Your models, the senior observer noted coldly, appear to have a fundamental flaw. Vectera stared at her probability matrices, watching as they struggled to calculate the likelihood of a species using failure as a stepping stone to success. Her perfect mathematical universe was crumbling, and she was beginning to suspect that no equation could capture the terrifying creativity of a species that viewed impossibility as merely a suggestion. Vectera's private chamber had become a tomb of broken equations. Holographic displays flickered with cascading failure reports as she initiated increasingly aggressive tactics, desperately trying to force humanity back into predictable patterns. "Deploy the heavy assault units," she commanded, her tendrils moving with sharp, agitated motions. "Overwhelm them with superior technology. They cannot adapt to what they cannot comprehend." In the ruins of a San Diego research facility, marine engineer Sarah Martins watched the massive hegemony walkers approach. Instead of fear, her eyes held the gleam of scientific curiosity. "Look at how their power cores pulse," she said to her team of civilian engineers. "The frequency pattern. It's almost like a Tesla coil on steroids." She glanced at the damaged alien power core they'd salvaged last week, then at the experimental electromagnetic pulse generator they'd been developing. "Anyone up for some crazy science?" she grinned. Vectera's tactical display suddenly erupted with warnings. Her walker's power cores were experiencing unprecedented feedback loops, their carefully regulated energy systems thrown into chaos by crude but effectively modified human technology. "Impossible," she hissed. "Their technological level is insufficient for such interference." But the innovations kept coming. In Detroit, master mechanic David Thompson stood in his converted auto shop, surrounded by a team of engineers from every major car manufacturer. The shop floor was littered with salvaged alien anti-gravity components and stripped-down muscle cars. "See, the aliens made one crucial mistake," Thompson explained, patting the hood of a modified Mustang. "They assumed we'd try to understand their tech before using it. But sometimes, you just need to hook things up and see what happens. The result was a fleet of improvised assault vehicles that combined raw horsepower with alien anti-gravity technology. Classic cars roaring through the skies, their engines modified to channel exotic energy through Detroit steel, turned every street into a three-dimensional battlefield. Strategic Overseer, her second-in-command, reported, "The humans are. They're innovating faster than our predictive systems can analyze. They're not following any known technological progression path." Vectera's displays showed the evidence of humanity's technological chaos theory in action. A group of video game developers had reprogrammed their motion capture systems to detect and track hegemony stealth units. College students had turned their dormitory's Wi-Fi network into a makeshift sensor grid that could predict alien ship movements. "Their adaptation rate exceeds all known parameters," she muttered, watching as another battle group reported critical system failures. "They're not building on established principles. They're simply trying everything at once." In a makeshift lab in Boston, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a quantum computing researcher, made a breakthrough by deliberately introducing errors into her calculations. "The aliens' computational systems are too perfect," she explained to her colleagues. "They can't handle mathematical noise, so let's give them some chaos to choke on." The resulting cyber attack used principles of quantum uncertainty to introduce random variables into hegemony targeting systems. Vectera watched in horror as her perfect tactical calculations dissolved into probabilistic soup. "More power," she commanded, her voice carrying an edge of desperation. "Overwhelm their primitive systems with raw computational force." But humanity's response wasn't to fight power with power. Instead, they found the gaps between the equations, the spaces where Vectera's mathematical perfection created blind spots. A teenager in Mumbai discovered that playing certain musical frequencies could disrupt hegemony shield harmonics. A retired watchmaker in Switzerland figured out how to turn old mechanical clocks into devices that could predict alien portal formations. A kindergarten teacher in Brazil realized that her students' finger painting patterns perfectly mapped hegemony patrol routes. In her command center, Vectera's tendrils moved frantically through failing tactical displays. Her forces were being undone not by superior technology, but by humanity's willingness to try solutions that no sane species would consider. "They're not even testing these innovations properly," she complained to her increasingly skeptical staff. "They're just throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks." And yet, her science officer noted quietly, their success rate continues to climb. Vectera stared at the chaos of human innovation spreading across her displays. They weren't following her predicted paths of technological advancement. They weren't building on established principles. They were creating their own reality, one impossible invention at a time. And as she watched another perfect formation fall to what appeared to be a modified ice cream truck equipped with salvaged alien weaponry, Vectera began to understand that she had made a terrible mistake. She had assumed that technological progress followed predictable patterns, but humanity seemed determined to prove that the only rule they followed was that there were no rules at all. The Hegemony Council's holographic forms materialized in Vectera's command center, their crystalline avatars reflecting the chaos displayed on her tactical screens. Her once pristine strategic center now pulsed with the erratic patterns of human resistance, each display showing another impossible deviation from her calculations. Strategic Overseer, the senior observer's voice carried centuries of authority. "Your invasion force stands at 60% capacity. Your predictions have proven catastrophically wrong. We demand your recommendation for immediate action." Vectera's tendrils moved through the statistical displays, each one showing the complete collapse of her mathematical models. She faced a choice that would define not just her career, but her entire species' understanding of warfare. "The humans," she began, her translator struggling to maintain composure, "have demonstrated unexpected adaptability. However, their success relies on scattered, uncoordinated innovations. A decisive strike against their population centers will." "Will what?" interrupted Council member Zixtal, their crystalline form flickering with electromagnetic disapproval. Force them into predictable patterns. Your models have failed, Vectera. The logical course is clear. Her tendrils coiled tightly. You suggest retreat before a pre-stellar civilization. We suggest survival, the senior observer stated. Your pride blinds you, Toe. My pride, Vectera's voice cut through the chamber, has won 274 campaigns. I will not be the first strategic overseer to retreat from primitives who got lucky. Execute Protocol Omega. Target all major population centers simultaneously. The Council's forms flickered in alarm. You would escalate to full warfare. I will show them the futility of resistance. Their chaos cannot withstand overwhelming force. The mathematics of superior firepower cannot be denied. As the Council's avatars faded, their disapproval hanging in the air like static, Vectera initiated her final gambit. Across Earth, hegemony warships moved into position for a synchronized strike against every major city. But humanity's response shattered even her darkest predictions. In Tel Aviv, Israeli quantum computing experts collaborated with Palestinian hackers, combining ancient cryptographic principles with modern technology to crack hegemony command codes. Indian and Pakistani military forces coordinated seamlessly, their decades of border conflicts forgotten as they shared tactical data and resources. Strategic Overseer, her communications officer reported, we're detecting unprecedented levels of global cooperation. Former adversaries are. They're working together. Vectera watched in disbelief as her attempt to break human resistance instead forged it into something stronger. North and South Korean defense systems merged into a single network. Iranian scientists shared breakthrough technologies with American engineers. Chinese and Japanese naval forces conducted joint operations against hegemony fleet formations. Their behavior defies all social stress models, she muttered, watching as centuries-old conflicts dissolved in the face of her threat. They should be turning on each other, not. Overseer. Multiple anomalies detected in human communication patterns. They're implementing something called Operation Pandora's Box. Vectera's screens exploded with activity as humanity launched their counteroffensive. But instead of a coordinated military strike, they unleashed pure chaos. Every innovation, every impossible adaptation, every illogical solution they'd discovered was deployed simultaneously in patterns that seemed completely random. Her tactical computers crashed trying to predict movement patterns that followed no known logic. Civilian communications contained military codes. Military channels carried cooking recipes that somehow coordinated global resistance. Children's games were being used to encrypt battlefield intelligence. Status report. She demanded, her tendrils whipping through failing holographic displays. Unknown. Overseer. Their tactics. They're not following any recognizable pattern. Every human response seems designed specifically to contradict the previous one. Our predictive systems cannot establish any baseline for analysis. Vectera watched as her remaining fleet formations dissolved into chaos. Humans weren't just adapting to her tactics. They were actively creating new ways to be unpredictable. Every attempt to impose order on their responses only generated more chaos. As her command center's displays showed the complete collapse of her invasion force, Vectera finally understood her terminal error. She had assumed that threatening humanity's existence would force them to behave rationally. Instead, she had removed their last reason to follow anyone's rules but their own. The mathematics of warfare, she realized too late, meant nothing to a species that had turned unpredictability itself into a weapon. Vectera stood alone on the command bridge of her flagship, surrounded by the ruins of her perfect equations. The holographic displays that once showed orderly battle formations now flickered with the chaos of her defeat. Of her mighty invasion force, only this single vessel remained operational, and even its systems were failing under the onslaught of human ingenuity. Begin final log entry, she commanded, her tendrils moving with uncharacteristic stillness. Strategic Analysis Update 274 Final. The ship's sensors detected the approaching Earth Defense Fleet, led by Admiral Jennifer Brooks. Victerra noted with scientific detachment that the human vessels incorporated hegemony technology in ways her engineers had declared theoretically impossible. "I stand at the terminus of understanding," she began, her translator struggling to convey the depth of her realization. "My failure was not in the mathematics. The equations were perfect. My failure was in believing that perfection itself had value in the face of human creativity." Her remaining displays showed the final battle statistics. Humanity had achieved victory not through superior technology or numbers, but through their remarkable ability to imagine solutions that no logical species would consider. "The humans possess a quality that defies quantification," she continued. "When faced with overwhelming force, they do not submit to mathematical certainty. Instead, they create new possibilities. They transform defeat into opportunity through methods that violate every known principle of strategic doctrine." The approaching Earth fleet held position just outside weapons range. Victerra's sensors detected active targeting systems, but no weapons charging. An unexpected courtesy. My models failed because they assumed that given identical inputs, all sentient species would choose similar optimal solutions. Humans, however, actively seek suboptimal approaches. They deliberately introduce chaos into ordered systems. They find strength in apparent weakness. She paused, watching as her ship's translation protocols processed an incoming transmission from Admiral Brooks. The message wasn't a demand for surrender, but an invitation to dialogue. Most remarkably, humans view failure not as a terminus, but as a source of new possibilities. Each defeat spawns multiple innovative responses. Their adaptation rate increases under pressure that would crush any logical species. They do not break when their strategies fail. They simply create new ones, with no regard for traditional progression. Victerra's tendrils moved through the wreckage of her tactical displays one last time, noting how each failed prediction had led to some new and impossible human innovation. "To the Hegemony Council, I recommend immediate cessation of all military actions against Earth, not because humans are superior, but because they are impossible. They cannot be conquered through conventional means because they refuse to acknowledge conventional limitations." The human fleet's formation shifted, creating an honor guard pattern that Victerra's cultural database suggested was a sign of respect rather than hostility. "Furthermore, I propose a radical departure from standard hegemony doctrine. The humans offer not just peace, but partnership. They suggest combining their chaotic creativity with our mathematical precision to create new forms of understanding. They see opportunity where we would see only defeat." Admiral Brooks' voice came through the command center speakers, translated into perfect hegemony harmonics. "Your move, Strategic Overseer. We can either keep fighting, or you can help us prove that even impossibilities can be calculated, if you're willing to embrace a little chaos in your math." Victerra's tendrils moved to the ship's primary control interface. With deliberate precision, she deactivated her weapon systems. "Final analysis," she concluded. "Humanity's greatest weapon is not their technology, their numbers, or even their adaptability. It is their fundamental belief that impossibility is merely a challenge to be overcome. They do not accept the universe as it is. They remake it as they imagine it could be." She watched as human engineering teams began docking with her vessel, their excitement at studying hegemony technology evident even through their environmental suits. "In conclusion, I submit myself to human custody, not as a prisoner, but as a student. There is a form of mathematics here that we have never encountered, one that embraces uncertainty and thrives on contradiction. Perhaps in understanding how humans calculate the impossible, we might ourselves evolve beyond the limitations of our own certainty." The log entry ended as the first human engineers entered her bridge, their faces showing not the triumph of conquerors, but the curiosity of explorers. Victerra realized that in her absolute defeat, she had discovered something far more valuable than victory: a new way of seeing the universe itself. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating the hegemony, It was showing them that even the most absolute laws of the universe could be rewritten by those brave enough to imagine alternatives.